And we're welcome to more than just a podcast. He's a West Ham legend. He scored 115 goals in all competitions for West Ham with 276 appearances, or so it says on Wikipedia. Tony Cottee.
Hiya, Sean. It was more than that. It was 146 goals, Sean, it was.
Do you know what? I always do this. I look up at Wikipedia and it's always wrong. So it's always a good start.
You're actually right in terms of my first spell at the club, but you've got to add on a few more for the second spell. So if you do that, then you get the 146. But I don't believe everything you read on Wikipedia.
Yeah, what I do usually, we'll go and update it afterwards. So also, and hopefully Wikipedia's got this right, you were born in Plaistow and a bit of an East End boy to begin with.
I was actually born in West Ham, so there you go, there's another one. I was born in the old Forest Gate Hospital, actually in West Ham, and I'm so proud to say that on my birth certificate it says birthplace West Ham, and I've always been very proud of that.
So what street were you living in around there at the time?
Well, I was only actually in, I was in East Ham with my parents, but we was only there for about 18 months. We was in Strome Road in East Ham, but like I say, it was only first 18 months of my life, and then we moved out to the Romford area, and then we sort of had spells at Wickford before settling back in the Romford area, and that was really where I was brought up as a kid, and obviously starting to play my early days of football.
And do you go back visiting? Because, certainly around Plaistow, we go a lot around the Black Line pub and everything. And, it's changed over the years I've been going. Have you seen a lot of changes in Romford and around West Ham since then?
Oh, yeah, massive changes, yeah. I mean, I think I'm actually due to go to the Black Line pub towards the end of the month and see a few guys and a few mates and that. So I look forward to that. But, Plaistow, I've already said the hospital I was born in has long since gone, and I think Romford's changed as well, and many other places sort of surrounding the East End really, and it feels, I don't know whether it's the case for everyone, but it feels that a lot of the West Ham supporters are now based out where I am, which is in Essex. So I think the geography of the country's changed, but that's isn't it, and I think we'll get on with it, and we all sort of just commute back into the football club now, and wherever you live, you sort of commute in and go to the game still.
Yeah, we're on our fourth pub with the Black Line because we started at the Prince Albert, which is being converted to flats. Greengate recently became a Tesco's. The Castle closed down, so they're closing down. The whole area is in need of investment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I think the Princess Alice as well. I think that one, there's a pub that used to be around the corner from the ground. So there's many pubs that are closed, but it's just a dying trade, unfortunately, and it's a great shame for the fans because where are you meant to go? You want to meet up and have your talking places and have a nice pint and something to eat before the game, but they're becoming few and far between. So we'll have to see. I mean, obviously there's a lot of talk about the club going to Stratford, and if that happens, that might well open up a few new places for the fans, but we'll just have to wait and see.
We'll talk about that later. So let me take you back to a 17-year-old. Do you remember that? New Year's Day, 1983?
Well, one of the happiest days of my life, Sean, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I watched it on YouTube last night. I don't know if you know, but there's a YouTube clip of your head in the goal.
Really? Yeah. I was lucky because, going back, we're going back nearly 30 years now, and, in those days, I think any youngsters listening to this will say, well, why is it on YouTube? And, I was actually lucky that the game was covered by ITV, the big match, which was the highlights program, and if the cameras hadn't been present at that particular game, my goal would never have been recorded because they just simply didn't record every single goal and every single incident that happens in football nowadays. So I'm very fortunate, really, and, for any youngsters who want to see the goal, they can see it, but I was just lucky on that particular day the game was televised.
Yeah. So what is your most magic? Is that your most magic match for West Ham, or would you pick another one?
I think people, one of the most frequently asked questions, what's your favourite goal? And it's absolutely bizarre, really, but I think I always answer with my first goal. It's very hard to explain as a fan, and first and foremost, I am a West Ham fan. I'm not a West Ham player who became a fan. I'm a West Ham fan who became a player, and to try and put all that in perspective is very difficult because I was at the 1980 FA Cup final, the 1981 League Cup final, which, bearing in mind I made my debut 18 months after that 81 League Cup final. I went from cheering on the terraces, my great heroes, the likes of Parksy and Alan Dev, Alvin, Ray Stewart, all these great players, Billy Bonds, Trevor Brooking, and within 18 months I was playing and making my first team debut. So, to try and begin to describe what my emotions were like as a 17-year-old, and then obviously to score a goal and to beat Tottenham 3-0, it just doesn't really get much better than that on a debut, does it? So that's why the answer is always my first goal, because I think it was so special.
Yeah. Well, we were there, myself and John, and my fellow podcast presenter, were there in 1986. We went to pretty much every home game and a few away games of that magic season. I've got a confession to make. You were my boyhood football hero. I met Bobby Moore once and had my photo taken with him, but he was my father's hero.
Yeah,
and
a wonderful man, Bobby.
In the 80s, it was, yourself being the home guy, and Frank McAvenny, but obviously he was brought in.
I'm very kind of you, Sean. Very kind.
I'm going to bring you, fast forward you a little bit, because we're going to ask some other questions, because I know you get asked about, the 86 a lot, and you've answered a lot of those. But, I mean, the elephant in the room, and the big question everyone always asks, and I think you may have covered it in your new book, because I haven't read it yet, but you broke a lot of West Ham hearts, including my own, when you left for Everton. What was the real reason? Were you forced out? What was the reasoning behind that?
Well, I don't actually cover it in the new book I've got out, Sean. I actually covered it in the first book, really. And the reason I left West Ham is I just became frustrated. I really did. And you mentioned that wonderful 86 season, and we should have won the league that year. We didn't. We finished third, and I got really excited as a player. Don't forget, I'd gone from being a fan to becoming a professional footballer, someone who desperately wanted to do the best for himself and for the club, obviously, because it was my club. And I really wanted us to kick on after that 86 season, but there was no investment. We didn't buy the 2 or 3 players that we all knew we needed. And I just got frustrated over the next couple of seasons. And also as well, which didn't help, was I got into the England team. And I think once you get into the England squad, you sit with all the other players, and they're all talking about their medals and winning the championship and the FA Cup, and how much money they was earning. And like any job, really, when you hear people, saying how great it is, and you believe that the grass is greener and that you can go somewhere else and maybe win, because football's such a short career as a footballer, as a fan, you can't change your allegiance, and I would never change my allegiance. I'm a West Ham fan, I will be to the day I die, but as a player, you can change what you're doing and what direction you're going in. And it was my choice to leave West Ham. It wasn't the club's choice. They didn't want me to leave. I decided to leave because I wanted to pursue the things I've just spoken about. Obviously, I went to Everton and won absolutely nothing. So perhaps looking back with hindsight, it wasn't the right thing to do. But, you make your decisions in life, and that was a big one I had to call. And, I had a wonderful time at Everton. It's a great club. But, looking back, and I have said this in the new book, I wish that I'd have stayed at West Ham for the whole of my career, because I could look back and be Sir Trevor Brooking and be one of the great heroes, and, I probably would be further up the goal scoring list, and, who knows what I could have achieved. But you come to crossroads in your life as a person and as a player, and that was one of them. And, obviously I decided to go to Everton.
And was it the same when you came back? Is it like you never left, or was it different when you returned the second time?
It was difficult for a while, because, when I left, and, you've obviously said yourself you was disappointed when I left, and I know that I upset a lot of fans, and, I think when I first couple of seasons, I think it was fair to say I had a very mixed reception. I think, some of the fans booed me and some of the fans clapped me. But it wasn't until, we've already mentioned his name, the great Bobby Moore, when Bobby Moore died, and I came back for the Bobby Moore game, and which was West Ham against the Premier League 11, and the Premier League very kindly asked me to represent Everton. I was so thrilled, and I was so pleased, because if anyone else had been invited, I would have been absolutely devastated. But at the same time, I was thinking, well, what sort of reception am I going to get? Because I didn't know, because I'd had very mixed before. And we done, which was unusual in those days, we done the lineup. All the teams, both teams lined up, and they actually read out the player's name and who he was representing. And when they read my name out, I thought, oh, here we go. And I just got a massive round of applause. And I think that was when I knew that if I could come back to West Ham, I think I knew that I would welcome back, and I knew that I wanted to come back. Because I've been at Everton for 5 years, I think, and I was missing London, and I wanted to get back. So that was the moment I knew I could come back to the club.
So obviously that moves on to the next question, which you're probably expecting, which is you finished your professional career in a Millwall shirt, which is a strange choice for a West Ham fan. I mean, how did that come about?
Well, my last season as a player, and again I cover this in the book, you know, it was a disastrous season for me because Martin O'Neill, I was at Leicester, Martin O'Neill left Leicester to go to Celtic, and I knew that I'd be leaving Leicester in the Premier League. I then went to Norwich for a very short spell in what was the equivalent of the Championship, and then I had a not very successful spell as a player manager at Barnet in what is the equivalent of League Two. And then there was 6 weeks left of the season, and this was in the days pre-transfer window, and I had to make a decision on where I wanted to go and play the last 6 weeks of the season. And I'll be honest with you, Sean. I mean, there was two reasons I went to Millwall. The first was they offered me the most money, and you know, people say footballers are selfish. Yeah, I had to do what was right for me and my family. I had to get the most money. And secondly, it just meant that if I played for Millwall in some capacity, I would have played in all 4 divisions for 4 different clubs in one season, which was, I don't know, I suppose it was a quirky sort of thing.
It's a record, I read that. Yeah, it's a record.
Yeah, absolutely.
And since.
Well, you can't break it now because of the transfer window. You can only play for 3 different clubs now. You can't play for 4. So, you know, it meant I achieved that. But, you know, when I went to Millwall, as soon as I signed for them, I thought it didn't feel right. Even driving to training in the morning when I went through the Blackwall Tunnel, it was... or the Rotherhithe Tunnel, I should say. You know, it was like, and I'm going the other side of the river. It didn't feel right to me. And there was lovely people. The staff and the people that worked at the club were lovely people. But I think the fans knew I was a West Ham boy, and I knew I was a West Ham boy that shouldn't be playing for Millwall. And you know, it was quite funny at times. I mean, I was only made a couple of substitute appearances, and as you went to get warmed up, all the Millwall fans were shouting at me, "What are you doing here? You're a West Ham boy. You should be in a Millwall shirt." And it was quite funny in a way. And you know, but it was, again, looking back, I think really I shouldn't have done it, but you know, I'd done it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
But I am trying to wipe that out of my history, I think.
Yeah, all right. Well, we'll move on. Let's go back to 1986. Obviously, I've already said, you know, I was there that wonderful season, amazing goals from you and Frank. 3rd place, which would have got us, obviously, Champions League. The question is, and this comes from John, one of our fellow podcast presenters who was with me for most of those games in 86. Do you think it's possible for West Ham to ever challenge for top 4 again with, you know, like they did with a mixture of old players, a few shrewd buys and youth players, or can it only be bought nowadays?
I think, unfortunately, the answer at the moment, Sean, is no. It doesn't mean to say we can't achieve that in the future. I mean, I look at one of our greatest rivals and I see what they've achieved and what they continue to achieve, and that is, I keep mentioning them, Tottenham Hotspur. And I look at them, they've got a very similar ground to us at the moment. They've got a very similar fan base, and yet, for some reason, they seem to have bought quality players and they're able to challenge to get into the Champions League. And I honestly believe if Tottenham can do it, we can do it. And that is my own feelings on it. It won't happen overnight because obviously we've had 2 disastrous relegations in the 21st century. Yeah. And I think that has set the club back a long way. But I think given time, given a bit of investment and potentially going to a new stadium, I think might give us the platform to achieve that. But the way things are at the moment, I think all we can all do is just look back and reminisce on what was a fantastic season in 86. And, you know, I never get tired of talking about it. The fans, you know, it was for the fans as much as the players. You know, It was a great time to be a player, but as a fan, I don't think you'd ever seen as much quality football as what we played that season. We'd never been that close to winning the league, you know, right up until the last but one game. And, you know, I think the fans, if we never get anywhere near it in the next 50 years, people like yourselves and people like me who was there and played in it will always look back and have, you know, the most fantastic memories. So winning 4-0 at Chelsea, when are we ever going to win 4-0 at Chelsea again? It's not going to happen, is it? It really
1st December, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. You know, we can dream, can't we, of it? But you know, just in reality, we're not going to achieve those heights again at the moment. I'm not saying we can't, because listen, we might get bought by a sheikh from somewhere, you know, somewhere in the Middle East or whatever, and we might have the money that Manchester City have got, because that's the only reason they've won the Premier League and are playing Champions League football, because of the money situation. So, you know, things might change, but unfortunately, the answer is no to the question you asked me.
Yeah. So let's talk about actually takeover bids and chairman, etc. So I know one of the things that is covered in your new book, which I still haven't read yet, but I will soon, is you talk about your involvement in the consortium that was a rival bid to Gold and Sullivan. How close did you get, to that being successful?
Well, it was the original takeover, Sean, which was the Icelandic one, which was I was heavily involved in. I mean, I was sort of on the periphery of, when Gold and Sullivan were involved with talking to other people. I actually talked to David Gold as well, which I cover in the book. So, I sort of knew what was going on with the Gold and Sullivan one a little bit, but the main involvement from a takeover point of view was the Icelandic one. And that was one of the main reasons I wrote the book, really, is because, people over the last 6 years since it happened, a lot of people, a lot of West Ham fans, they asked me that question, weren't you involved in the takeover? And I said, yeah, I was really involved with the Icelandics and that. And when people ask the question, they sort of give me that look as if to say, yeah, all right, yeah, of course you were, yeah, I don't really believe what you're saying. And it frustrates me because I put a lot of time and effort into it, and I had nothing but the best interests of the club at heart to try and achieve it. And yet people don't seem to believe my involvement. So it's one of the main reasons I've done it. And obviously to put, from a historical point of view, to explain exactly what happened and why a group of Icelandic bankers bought West Ham United Football Club. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to reading that. I did see it was reported you were involved in the American bid against Gold and Sullivan afterwards as well, with a chap that died during the bid. Is that true as well?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to the guys. I mean, you're referring to the Intermarket guys.
Intermarket, that's the one.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not 100% sure that their actual bid was ever a real bid. I mean, a real bid is when the money's on the table, you've got proof of funds, and everyone knows what's going on. And I always felt with Intermarket it was a little bit chaotic, and there was never really a firm bid on the table. And, when push come to shove, and I think they deserve great credit for it, when it come to it, David Gold and David Sullivan both put their money on the table and effectively rescued the club, because I think we would have gone into administration, and you've only got to look at Portsmouth Football Club and the bets and everything that's going on there to realise what could have happened to our great club. So I've always said they deserve great credit for that. How they've run the club over the last couple of years, obviously there's many things that I think personally they could have done better or differently. But they deserve credit for rescuing the club.
Yeah, well, you talk about that. Obviously, you had a big fallout with Terry Brown. He sacked you as a match day host. I think that's covered in the book. How did you get on with the two Davids and Karen Brady? Now, I know when we spoke to Stuart Slater, he said, well, they're not really involved with a lot of the old guard anymore, certainly from his point of view. How do you get on with them?
Well, I mean, I've always gotten very well with David Gold and David Sullivan. Over the last 10 years, I've bumped into them quite a few times and always never had a problem with them. Karen Brady, I didn't know, and obviously she's only been involved at the club since the takeover. I've had a couple of chats with her, should we say? But I'm still talking to the club, and I still would like to be involved at the club. I think over the last 11 years since I retired as a player, I've been working in and out of the club. You mentioned that Terry Brown sacked me, David Gold and David Sullivan sacked me. So it's not unusual for me to I work at the club, and then you get sacked, and then but it's in my blood. It's my club, and if the club, which they have done recently, say we want to speak to you, and then you sit down and you have a chat and find out if there's a way to be involved there. So I'm hoping that within the next month or so I can get back to working at the club and helping out in whatever shape or form they want me to do it.
Yeah, we hope that too. Let's move on to some modern times. Obviously, good start to the season, 8th place, 15 points. Where do you think? I mean, what do you think of the season so far, and where do you think we're finished? Because some people are saying we're getting a little carried away.
I think it's been a very good start to the season. I think we needed to start well, because if we'd have had a poor start, if we'd have had a start like what Reading, QPR, Southampton have done, I think we would be in massive trouble now. I think Big Sam would be under big pressure because of you've only got to look at the fixtures that are coming up. Starting with the Manchester City game that's just passed, we've got a great point against them. But we've got Chelsea, Manchester United, Liverpool, Everton, Newcastle. There's some big games coming up, and you know, the fact we've got 15 points gives us a real good cushion, so that if we do have a bit of a bad spell, which will happen at some stage in the season, then at least it gives us a cushion to sort of rally and try and keep out of the bottom three. So I've been very pleased with the start so far. I think at times we've played some good football, because that's always been a question mark under Big Sam. I think at times, particularly the Fulham game, I thought we played some really good stuff. There's been a couple of poor performances, as we know. But I think in general, I think I've been really pleased with the start. And like I say, the most important thing was the points are on the board, and it gives us a chance going into what's going to be a difficult spell pre-Christmas.
If you were to pick an early candidate for Hammer of the Year on the performances so far?
Mark Noble, without a shadow of a doubt, Mark Noble. I think he's been outstanding. He was against Manchester City. There's been talk of him breaking into the England team. I hope he gets the chance. I hope he gets into the squad. Obviously, there's a lot of quality midfield players. That's one of the areas we are blessed with for England, I think. So it's going to be difficult, but I think he's been the standout candidate so far. I think Andy Carroll will once he gets his goal, we'll see him get a little bit more confident in front of the goal, and I think he will go on, hopefully, to become a legend in the West Ham shirt. And there's been some other good performances as well, but for me, Mark Noble's been the standout candidate for Hammer of the Year, as he was last season. He went very close last year.
So, do you get to go to many West Ham games nowadays in a non-professional manner?
Sadly, I don't know. The only game, it's not a good sign, is it? The only game I've been to this year was the League Cup defeat to Wigan. And I mean, it's quite simple, really. I mean, any game that's on a Saturday, I can't go to because of my Sky commitments. So I'm the only person, the only West Ham fan, I think, who actually is pleased when we play Stoke on a Monday night, because it means I can go to the game. So I will be going to the Stoke game, and I'll also be going to the Liverpool game, which is Sunday in December. But, I've just not had... It's always hard for me to sort of give a real sort of review of how everyone's done at the club, because if you're not seeing the live games regular, you guys are there week in, week out, and even going to away games. But I'm not allowed to cover West Ham for Sky, because they always, not just me, but they accuse us all of being a bit too biased towards that club. So I don't get to see the boys live. I only get to see the highlights, which can be distorted, as we know. So I'm looking forward to the Stoke and Liverpool games, but I just hope it's a better result than the Wigan game I went to. Yeah.
And your boys, West Ham as well, did they get a choice on who they support? Did they go with you?
No, they had no choice. They was told from a very early age. I mean, I've got twin boys. They're now 14, coming up 15, and although they don't particularly play, they play in the Sunday side, but they're not playing to any great standard. They enjoy playing football, but I think they have got a real passion for West Ham, which it wasn't always there. I think, I bought them the kits when they was 18 months old, and West Ham, and I just couldn't bear the thought of them supporting any other team. So I have brainwashed them, and although they had a sort of spell where they sort of wavered a bit and perhaps weren't that interested in football, I think over the last couple of years they really, really got into it. And I took them to the playoff final against Blackpool at Wembley, and we just had one of those real father and son days, and it was a fantastic day, not just for me and my boys, but for everyone who went to that wonderful game.
It was amazing, wasn't it? I thought it was worth, not getting automatic promotion just to have that day at Wembley.
Well, it was quite funny, because I bumped into David Gold. It would have been probably around about this time last year, and we was going quite well and everything, and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I'm looking forward to the playoff final at Wembley, David." He looked at me in sheer horror at the thought of going to Wembley via the playoffs, and I said, "I really hope for the fans' sake that we get a day out at Wembley," because it had been, I mentioned right at the start, the Liverpool game, 1981, it was 31 years ago, and the younger fans had never watched West Ham play at Wembley, and I said it for the right reasons, because I wanted the fans to have a day out, and I felt that was so important, and I honestly didn't want to go up automatic promotion. I wanted to go and have a day out at Wembley, and even if we'd have lost the final, at least we would have had the day out at Wembley. I know the Premier League is the real sort of be all and end all, but I'm just so pleased for the fans that it was a wonderful, wonderful day.
Yeah, well, we had two playoff finals and an FA Cup final in the Millennium, which wasn't quite the same, but
not quite the same. No, that playing at Wembley is special, and Wembley is a special place for West Ham fans since the 60s and the World Cup and everything else. It's always been a special place for us, but there's been a unfortunate generation of West Ham fans who have grown up and not seen us play there. So I'm just so pleased with that.
It was magical. Anyway, move on to our last question. The Olympic Stadium. I sit on the West Ham Advisory Board on the Olympic Committee and been involved with Karen Brady and David Sullivan on that. And we've been a privileged group of fans to see the plans. I know it's divided fans at times. You know, the latest poll on these at Mother Brown sort of says 60% in favour, 30 against, and 10 undecided. I think you've come out to be quite pro the move, but you know, the big debate is, you know, site views, retractable seating, whether it will have an atmosphere, whether we'll fill the stadium. What's your latest thinking? Because so much has happened just in the last week.
Well, it has, and also I think it's going to happen over the next few weeks, and you know, hopefully before. I mean, it's absolutely, first and foremost, absolutely ridiculous that we don't know who is going to be in the Olympic Stadium. Bearing in mind the Olympics were announced 7 years ago. We've had a wonderful Olympics in the summer, and we still don't know what's going to happen after the Olympics. I think it's absolutely ridiculous, but that is not the club's fault. That is obviously all the bureaucracy and everything that goes on around it. Where do I sit on the Olympic stage? I mean, first and foremost, as much as I love the bowling ground, Upton Park, it is geographically a tough place for the fans to get to. We've already spoke about all the pubs closing, etc. And you know, I would like to see us, again, I've already mentioned it, competing to get into the Champions League. Now, how do you compete to get in the Champions League? You have to have a stadium with a capacity and the income coming in to compete with the big boys. And, you know, Tottenham are going to go to a 60,000. Arsenal have got a 60,000. Chelsea, within the next 5 years, will go to a 60, maybe more, thousand capacity. And if we want to be one of the big four London clubs, then we've got to have a stadium with that sort of capacity. Otherwise, we're going to be a QPR, a Charlton, a Fulham, and I don't want that. I think we're bigger than those clubs. We need to compete. So it makes sense to go to Stratford. I think wherever you are in London or the home counties, you can get to Stratford. It's the best connected train station in Europe, so it makes sense. But having said all that, it is so important that we get a stadium that is right for the fans. And I'm very privileged as well, Sean. I have also seen the plans as part of my ongoing talks with the club. If the club can deliver what they have suggested on the plans, then I think everyone will be happy.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the club cannot come out and explain exactly what they're trying to do, and also they've got the issue of it's all right having these plans, but who is going to pay for it? And you know, the government's already spent a fortune on it, although you could probably argue that they was 300 million under budget. Well, if that's the case, put that 300 million towards the stadium and let's have a legacy of a stadium that's fit for West Ham and everyone else. So,
well, there does seem to be a bit of an argument, doesn't there, on who's going to pay for it. I believe that Egbert Magnuson offered £100 million if retractable seating would have been built in from the beginning, and they rejected it, and now it possibly is going to cost 200 million. And Boris is allegedly having some argument with the Treasury with his old Eton mate, George Osborne, saying, you know, we want some of that contingency. And you know, West Ham fans picking.
We're also talking to the NFL as well, aren't they? At the moment, that's come up as well with discussions with NFL teams. So, you know, we're not the only. I personally can't see it. No. But you know, we are not the only group at the table. There are 3 other bidders, and this NFL stuff that's come from nowhere. I honestly believe that we are the best positioned group to take over at the stadium. I believe that. I think we are the only group that should be given that opportunity. But I stress, and I think the club have made their stance on this, and you know, it's very difficult for them because they cannot come out and explain exactly what's going on because they are all under NDAs, myself included.
Yeah, I had to sign 2 NDAs.
I'm sure you have as well. Yeah, so it's very difficult to come out and say, oh, well, this is what they're going to do, blah, 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 because we can't do that. But what you can say is that if the club go ahead and keep to the plans that I have seen and you've seen, I think we would be looking at a stadium that would be a fantastic stadium that the fans would love, that would create the atmosphere and would provide the legacy that we all want to see for the Olympic Stadium in a location where everyone can get to it. So there are many, many positives for going now. If for whatever reason we don't get the Olympic Stadium, then I think it's back to the drawing board and maybe looking at rebuilding the Chicken Run and just staying where we are. But, you know, I think a lot's going to happen, as I say, over the next few weeks. And I personally, I think everyone's a bit tired of it, really. It should have been done. It all should have been done 10 years ago. You know, it needs to be sorted out and sorted out quickly.
Yeah, last two questions, Olympic Stadium. Well, so one of the stories is that, again, the Independent and Press Association have said that West Ham have bid £8 million a year, which would be £880 million over a 99-year lease. It sounds a lot compared with what Man City were paying up to last year, which was £2 million to rent their stadium, just gone up to £3 million. They had the naming rights, which they bought for £2 million, sold for £10 million. Is it good business? If it is right, if we are paying £8 million, is that good business?
Well, again, I'm not privy to the figures, and to be honest, that's the first time I've heard of that. What I would say is London is not Manchester, and Manchester is not London. It's two different areas, so I accept there's going to be a premium. But we've got to pay the right price for basically renting the stadium. And again, I haven't seen those figures, so I don't know what is on the table and what's not. But the bottom line for all what's going to go on, and I have been very pro the stadium right from the start. And my first question mark was, can we put retractable seats on the track so that the fans are not too far away? Because the bottom line is the football club is about the fans. And if the fans aren't happy, the fans won't go to the stadium. So that is the thing. If the plans and the finances stack up, and it is in the best interest of not just the club but the supporters, because they are the most important group at the football club. Are the supporters, not the players. It's not the manager, the coach, the chairman, and whoever. It's the supporters, because without the supporters, there is no club. So as long as the supporters it's in the best interest of the supporters and the club as well, then I don't think it matters how much we pay, as long as it is in their best interest. So, we'll have to wait and see what develops on that one.
So last question on the Olympic Stadium. Obviously, 60,000 is a lot. There's been talk about we might fill it with neutrals, maybe get tourists in, even maybe as cheap as some of the, Stoke games, nothing against Stoke or Wigan, but, a pound a seat. Do you see a problem with that? Maybe filling the gods up with
I've got
neutrals?
no problems at all with a 60,000 capacity, and I've said this before and I will say this again. If West Ham are successful and they are competing for Champions League football, 60,000 will not be enough. 100% guaranteed it will not be enough. If we would have, the Blackpool playoff final at Wembley, I know it's Wembley, I know it's a one-off game, but we could have sold that stadium easily, 90,000 West Ham fans, easily. Yeah. Because I know friends of mine who couldn't get tickets who wanted to go to the game. Loads, I'm sure you're the same, but we couldn't get enough tickets. So, again, the key word is a successful football team, a successful West Ham team. 60,000 will not be enough. Now, people say, well, what about when you play Wigan and Stoke, as you've quite rightly done? The answer to that is we will do the kids for £1, and we will get the next generation of West Ham fans to be able to come along to a game with their dad at a reasonable price, and we will get 6, 7, 8-year-olds supporting West Ham. Because at the moment, what they're going to do, they're going to put the telly on, see who's winning the Champions League or the Premier League, and they're going to support those teams. Unless you can get the kids to the ground, they're going to support the other teams. So I've got no problem with it, and I think pretty much, we will guarantee to fill that stadium, 60,000, every single home game. I've got no problems with that, because it will be easier for the fans to get to. The big games sell themselves anyway. And obviously against the lesser teams, we can do the incentives, but it comes back, I'm saying all this providing we've got a successful team on the football pitch. Now, by successful, I'm defining that as being a Premier League football team. Obviously, if we go down to the Championship, you're not going to get 60,000.
Yeah, true. So, just before we get you to plug your book, or allow you to plug your book, you joined Twitter recently, haven't you, as Tony Cottee 9? Are people being friendly to you, or are you getting a bit of grief from some? How's it going?
No, I think I've only had 2 bad tweets over the last couple of weeks, which is fine, but I've got to be honest, Sean, it's not something that I am old school, believe it or not, and it's not easy for me to go onto Twitter. I've got my lovely girlfriend who helps out a little bit with it, and so I go on there as much as I can, but I'm not going to be one of these guys who's on there every night examining what people say or don't say. So I will, as and when I get free time, I will go on there. I put a tweet on there on Saturday morning saying that I felt West Ham would beat Man City 1-0 with Andy Carroll scoring the goal. We very nearly did. But I've not put anything on there since, and to be honest, I haven't had the time to do it. So it's a busy world for me at the moment. I've got lots going on, obviously, particularly with the book, and it's not viable for me to go on Twitter every single 5 minutes of the day. So,
well, that seems a good point to plug your book. And where can people get hold of your book?
Well, the main place they can get it at the moment is to go online. I think you've done it yourself. Is to go to www.x-hammers.com, and that is my great friend Tony McDonald, who helped me to write the book. That's a good website to get it. The book should be available in the likes of Waterstones and WH Smith over the next couple of weeks. I think they've already gone into the shops. So that, there's a few ways of getting it. I'm hoping that it will be stocked in the club shop as well at West Ham, which would be nice. And I've got a nice chat with them on Wednesday to see whether, again, that's going to be possible. So there's 2 or 3 ways for the fans to buy it. And I'm also going to be doing some book signings as well. So as soon as I know the dates, I will go onto Twitter and let everyone know when I'll be doing the book signings. But I'm really pleased with it. It's 256 pages. It's a softback, but it's quite a large sort of book. But I put a lot of time and effort into it. And as I said to you, a few minutes ago, the main reason for writing it is to basically put down historically what happened in terms of the takeover. So I hope the fans enjoy it, and hopefully it'll be a nice Christmas present for a few of the ones.
Well, I think I got a signed copy, and I think signed copies available from the X-Hammer website.
Absolutely,
but I know it's available from Amazon.co.uk as well.
I forgot to mention Amazon. Thank you for doing that, Sean. I knew I'd forget something.
Okay, Tony Cottee, TC, guest of More Than Just a Podcast. Thanks very much.
Sean, it's been my absolute pleasure, and let's hope the Hammers go on and have a very successful season, and hopefully we can have a chat in 10 years' time talking about a Champions League club playing at the Olympic Stadium. That'd be lovely.
Thanks, TC.
Cheers, Sean. Thanks, mate.